All right, so what's up, everybody? It's iCkEdMeL, and I got Akaya here with me. She was a former CPS person that worked in the system, and she was kind enough to come on and join us. What can you tell us about your experience? Like, what years did you work with CPS, and like, what was that like?
I was an investigator. I worked in Dallas County, so city of Dallas, in some of their suburban areas. I did investigations from 2013 to 2015.
Hmm.
And it was cool. Actually, I started in 2012. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
2012 to 2015.
Okay.
But it was an experience. I've done casework before, but not in investigations with, child safety. So
Mm.
it was similar to managing a workload. We have new investigators are opened up by the state when a concern is expressed through either a hotline or through like an email been sent to the Department of Family and Protective Services. So there is a screening process, and all reports are investigated, but majority of them are, just to be on the safe side. Most of them at least want you to make contact with the family and physically see them to ensure that they're okay.
Okay.
In each case that involves a child that's 5 or younger requires an investigation, regardless of what
Mm.
the claim is. It's just a formality just to ensure child safety, because that age group is not typically able to verbally express if there's something going on with them or in their home.
Okay. So, because a lot of people have questions regarding, especially with Maleah Davis, but there's so many children like Armani Hill, I think it was, and just like, do you have control of when these kids go back and they return? When there's a case where like there's a history, and a lot of times there's no proof of some of the situations. Do you have control whether the kids go back to the families? Like if there is a situation where there might be abuse, do you guys control that? Is there people above you that control that?
Right. I mean, as an investigator, the job is to determine whether or not there's any abuse or neglect. If if there's a finding of some type of abuse or neglect, it is referred to the family court system. So yes, there's
Okay.
a judge that presides over the case. So
Okay.
it's not the investigator or individually CPS that's saying, oh, we're going to go send the child back. It is a process, and most of them have
Okay.
to complete some type of plan that involves like to the family, whether it's counseling or parenting or education, but things to make them better so that the household is safer. So it's not up to the investigator. There is
Okay.
a court and a judge that presides over that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's interesting to kind of clarify because I find myself with a lot of these stories when I hear that the children were sent back. A lot of people look at the CPS investigator, but it's probably more of a system involved. It's not just that particular person. And one of the things that I've heard commonly is that like a lot of times, I know you're not in that system anymore, but I've heard that you're overworked, you have a bunch of cases, there's this pressure. I don't know if that's true or not. They said there's this pressure where you have a bunch of cases and there's this timeline, and if you send a child back, if you approve of it, you can get in trouble. Like, is that stuff true, or like how does that really work? I don't know.
I mean, casework varies, but depending on what area you're in. So major
Okay.
metropolitan areas, of course, there are more people, so there's going to be higher volume of cases. So it really is a combination of how many investigators do they have in a region? Are they all fully trained and fully
Yeah.
able to carry a workload? And if there are any shortcomings to that, then of course you can expect for the workloads to be high. It was kind of a little bit over
Yeah.
time
No, I hear
as
you.
people transition out of investigations, then the workloads got higher. So it can be a lot. I mean, but I think that it's equivalent to anyone's in casework, even though a caseworker in a hospital will tell you that they have a lot of case people that sit in those seats to do the work. So it's just a balance of being able to understand what the rules are that govern CPS and knowing the Texas Family Code definitions are for abuse and neglect, and being able to abide by those time frames that are set for investigation. So there's not like a hardcore penalty, like if you're behind on your investigation, you're going to get fired. It doesn't
Okay.
necessarily work like that.
Well, do you think that the CPS system as it is now, do you feel it's effective?
When you say effective, what do you mean? Like, is it necessary?
Not that it's necessary, but my question, I think a lot of people is that there's so many stories. If you look at Maleah Davis, Armani Hill, and like all these other stories where there's a history of child abuse, and we find out about it, and then they still get sent back to the family. So that's where I wonder is like, is CPS really effective?
Yeah, I mean, you have to believe that it is. I mean, it is a state-run agency. So although there are cases that make it to the news and depict that CPS has failed to do their part,
Right,
that's
right.
not the majority. There are a lot of families that
Okay.
have been impacted by CPS where they've been able to connect them with community organizations so that their homes could be improved to ensure the safety and welfare of a child. So I can't lump it all up and say that after a single case that because a mistake was made or a decision was made and it turned out to be not the better decision, that CPS is not doing their part. I can't say that.
Okay. So if I hear what you're saying, so let me ask you this. So are you saying that CPS is effective then?
I believe they
For
are. I
children
mean,
like Maleah
they're not
Davis
perfect.
and Amarni Hill, are you gonna tell me that CPS is effective?
CPS is effective. I don't know all the ins and outs of the details in regards to the case for Maleah Davis. I'm not the investigator. I was not
Right,
in the
right.
courtroom when the decision was made to return the
Okay.
child home. So I would need access to all of the documentation to be able to review whether or not something was like legitimately done in error. Because the decision to reunite a child with the family is always going to be in the best interest of the child, unless it says that the child will be harmed or injured in the future. Because we don't have a crystal ball at CPS, neither do you, to be able to see into the future. So they have to use what's presented to them. So information has been concealed, or they just weren't able to unveil any of those issues.
Did you hear about the Maleah Davis story? Like, I was just kind of curious on your thoughts, what you feel about it, how you feel about that story in particular.
Appears to be a result of neglect or abuse, either by the parent or someone close to the family. It just breaks your heart because as a parent, your number one job, the first priority is to keep your child safe.
Right.
So as a parent, if you're unable to do that, you should be raising your hand, screaming for help, trying to find someone who can help you adequately care for your children so that they don't end up hurt or in a situation where they're being hurt by someone that's a part of the family or close to the family. It's just unbelievable that the situation escalated to that point because she was just a little girl. Like, what could
Right.
she have done
Right. Right.
to set him off or to put these things in motion? She just didn't deserve that. It's just not right.
No, I totally agree with you on that. What I wanted to ask you too, to get a little bit of insight, I really appreciate being on here. What I wanted to ask you too is like, how can we, as a society, as people, how can we make a difference? Is there a voting process? Like, a lot of times when we vote locally, a lot of people don't appreciate that. They don't know about that. I didn't know about that until recently, a few months ago. If you vote locally, it really actually makes a change within your state. I don't know if CPS is affected by that or not. Is there something? Because when I covered a couple of these stories, people were asking me like, "Yo, what can we do?" And I was like, I honestly, I have no idea. So I was hoping maybe I could ask you: Is there something that we can do to reach out? Is there people we can vote, or like policies, or I don't know.
Yeah, there are different ways to be involved. I mean, you may want to start by reviewing the information available on the Department of Family and Protective Services, because there you'll find the family code and actually what governs the organization, like why it's there, why it exists, how
Right.
investigations are done, how determinations are made, so that you can educate yourself about what they are supposed to be doing. And that way, when you have a question, you can relate to what the process and procedures are and be able to say, okay, this doesn't seem to line up, or it does seem to line up, but why was this the outcome? And
Mm.
there are other organizations within each, I guess, city within Texas that have support groups that advocate for child safety. There's CASA, which is a volunteer program where you can be a court-appointed advocate for a child that's in CPS custody. Again, just being another person, another layer of protection for the child. So if the child is not confiding in their caseworker, if they're not confiding in the document, they may have someone that's considered there to speak on their behalf that they may be able to confide in and share any consent, so that way the court is made aware of what those issues are before reuniting a child with a parent or family member after an allegation of neglect. A lot of it starts with just being aware. So a lot of people fail to speak up when they notice something, when there's something concerning going on. A lot of people don't want to get involved for some strange reason.
Mm,
So they may have an email or a feeling that somebody is doing the right thing, which is to make a report, whether it's true or false. Just make a report. I'm concerned. I saw a girl, looks like she's being abused. Somebody should go take a look. But people say, "Oh, it's none of my business. I can't do nothing
right,
about it.
right.
I can't save the world." And when things like that happen, if you saw something or you believe something was taking place, you should make a report. Period.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And it's something too within some of our communities that there's this whole it's a no snitching thing. You shouldn't report or talk about this stuff. And I really do think it is important
Yeah.
for people to talk about this kind of things. And sometimes too, I can understand that like if when you talk about these things, you get reprimanded. People don't want you to talk about it, and you get in serious trouble. And I found out recently that there's a lot of organizations that they're actually you talk about it and you reach out for help. They give you resources and information, and there's just this whole thing with CPS, and this is why I reached out to you because there's this whole thing, and I felt this myself. To be honest with you, I felt like it doesn't seem like they're doing enough. It seems like they're ineffective. You wonder what are they trying to do, but at the same time, you see some of these organizations send the children back to abusive situations, and it's like, well, what's the purpose? I know that a lot of times they want to unify the children with the parents. They want to bring them back together, kind of thing. And it's I've heard from other CPS people, you don't seem to have that negative outlook, but I've heard from a lot of other. I mean, I haven't spoken to them, but I've seen videos where they say that they're overworked. They have a bunch of cases on top of them. They There's these situations that if they reunite or they write a certain report, that if it's wrong, they're going to get in trouble. They're going to get written up. But it seems to me like you're telling me that it's not the case, and that CPS workers are having to.
It wasn't my experience.
It wasn't your case. Okay.
No, it wasn't my experience. I mean,
Okay.
the same processes and guidelines are for the state. So I can't
Right.
speak for how another state works. So anybody that's working in Texas had the same guidelines to work through. So I was never written up, and I had a lot of cases at one point in time. I think when I finally made the decision that I was going to go ahead and move, on from investigations, I had like 70 cases at one time.
How many at one time?
77.
77
And so
cases at one
of
time?
family.
And 77 cases at one time, that's
I can't hear
normal?
you.
I'm sorry, the audio, I think our connection's gone. But 77 cases at one time, that's normal?
No, I said that's not normal. That was an extremely high caseload.
Oh,
That is
okay, okay.
not the normal caseload.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
I can't change that. If the case is assigned to me, I do my part to make sure I make contact with the family. I see my children, complete my investigations, and keep it moving. I cannot cry and fuss about the number of files I'm getting. I signed up for the job. So
Right.
CPS didn't come out and look for me and recruit me. I said that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do the job. So I did the job. It was stressful. It was hard. And eventually I felt burned out and I had to
Mm.
move on from there. But, during the time, my goal was to make sure that the children that were assigned to me were safe.
Did you ever feel, I mean, is there
Yeah.
pressure? Is there pressure? I mean, literally, you have to decide sometimes whether the child stays there or they go home. I've heard so many stories where, like, it's this situation where, like, um, somebody called 911 on a parent and reported something they saw, but maybe it wasn't true. But I hear that these other cases about parents that are really abusing children and they don't get any kind of, nobody holds them accountable. But is that really true? Like, do you have this situation? Do you have that pressure where you're worried about, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the wrong thing? Or it's never that case? Is it just white and black? Or is there gray areas between that?
I mean, if you're doing your investigation, you should know, what's going on with the family. And again, we're looking at immediate issues. So is there
Okay.
something in the foreseeable future that will impact this child's safety? And you don't make decision by yourself. As an investigator, you are not the authority to say, yes, the child stays or goes. Every investigation requires you to follow up with the supervisor and advise of your findings. A decision
Okay.
is then made as to what steps need to happen next. Any event that they believe there's enough information to remove a child, that has to be approved by what they call a program director. And so it's not just a single decision that's made, and the person whoever comes out is responsible for whether or not the child is safe or not. They have to report back their findings, get an approval from a supervisor before leaving that residence or school, before moving on and leaving their child with the family. So it's layered. It's not just a single decision.
Okay. No, thank you. I really appreciate that because I seen some of the stories, and a lot of people see some of these stories, and we look and we're like, "Wow, it's just this CPS worker, and how could they do that?" But you're saying it's not just that. There's a whole system. It's layered. It's not just one person approving it. You're saying there's like a whole
No,
system that goes through it, and okay, that's interesting. I really appreciate that. I mean, let me ask you this: do you think there's some like room for improvement? I mean, I know you're not in the system now,
always.
but is there room for improvement? Like, you do feel it?
Yeah, there's always room for improvement. As an
Okay.
organization, Department of Family and Protective Services, it seems like everything is reactive. So they're
Right.
only involved because a report has been made. I would love to see them take a stance to be more proactive in providing education and resources to families before we get to a situation where abuse and neglect has happened, because it's really unfortunate for abuse to occur when it's just like cyclical, like someone is just used to it. Like, this is how
Right.
I was
Right.
treated, this is how I was raised, and leaving that site when they haven't had an opportunity to learn anything different because they haven't changed their circumstances. So it would be nice for the organization to take an approach to try to circumvent some of the future abuse, because what we do know is that data supports that a person who has been abused more than likely abused as a parent as well.
I've
So
heard that
if you
so
can get in
much.
front of it
Yeah. And
and teach them better, then
yeah,
they'll do better.
and they tend to repeat it. I've heard that so many times. Like, there's children that have been
Mm-hmm.
abused, and then they start doing the same thing within their relationships and life, and it's just this crazy
Mm-hmm.
vicious cycle. And the other thing too, one of the things I talk about on my channel is that sometimes too is that fathers, they don't get the education that they need. It's I talk about when I was in the hospital with my daughter. They just looked to her mother and they talked to her and they gave her the education, but half of the nurses, they never looked at me. I wasn't looked at as a parent. So for me, I was like, wow, it made me feel less than. And a lot of the information was actually crucial to how to deal with when a child's upset, when they're crying. What do you do when they're, whining, and you're getting stressed out, and those kind of things. And sometimes dads that aren't given that education either. I know you were there before. Why aren't you there now? You just moved on to better things, or
You say, how did it work out? What do you mean?
like, did you move on from them? I mean, honestly, I've
Uh-oh.
looked at some CPS situations and some of the ex people that were there, and they were like, "Oh, I can't stand that place. I felt horrible. Whatever." It doesn't seem like you had that experience. So, did you just move on to
No,
better
I was just
things?
tired. Yeah, I was just tired. It's a lot.
Okay.
Investigations is a lot, and it just it takes a toll on you as an individual. So for me, it's just how you process information. Some people take it and it just, whatever happens that day is done. At the end of the day, they reset, start from it. I seem like I carried a lot of it with me. So
You
it
get right.
impacted me personally. So it made it hard to sleep. Like, I'll be strategizing, like, who I need to go see the next day. And, oh, I need to touch base with this family. I need to close this one. So my mind would be working all the time. And then there were times where, the job just required a lot. So it would be times where I did have to remove a child and I didn't have a foster placement. So I had to spend the night in the office, which took me away from
Wow.
my daughter. And I was just like,
Really?
okay, this is not the work-life balance that I need. I can't be holding another baby at work and then having to send my baby home with my parents so that she's not neglected. So it's just a decision about my personal preference. And it's just, I wanted some more balance in my life.
I wish there was something we could do to improve the system. CPS, they're. I mean, what I've heard is that they're overworked and that there's, um, they're underpaid too. I don't know. I've never worked in that system. I don't know if you were underpaid, but for the things that you guys do, it seems like you would hopefully get paid adequately.
I mean, I don't know what the workloads are like now. I know they had a big initiative where they hired a lot of caseworkers to put more people. out in investigations, and I was told, that the workloads had gone down since then.
Okay.
As far as the pay, I mean, it's a caseworker, so it's comparable to the averages throughout the U.S. about casework. I can't say, yeah, they're paying enough or not. It's a job. You
Okay.
choose that at the beginning. So either you're in a career as caseworker and you're okay with what the salary is, or you just don't and you move on to something else. It's, what do you want them to pay you for, the amount of work you're doing or for the role that you're in? Because that's unpredictable. So how much time it's going to take to move through an investigation, you don't know until it starts. And you do the work to make sure that the child is safe. It's not about the compensation. I guess it just depends on the person. That was not a factor for me. I earned what I earned, and I stayed there as long as I did without an issue with the compensation.
What can you recommend as far as what can people do? Is it education? Like, how can people be better parents? How can we take care of these kids? And as us, because we can't rely on these systems. Honestly, I mean, we can't really fully. We have to hold them accountable. What can we do and that's what I've been asked. What can we do to make a change, to protect the children?
I mean, you have to align yourself up with exactly what change you want to see made. I don't know if there's a single, I guess, item that you could present that CPS should do differently. So unless
Okay.
you have that type of insight, I mean, they have legislative session every year. I mean, it's the same body of government for the state where you can speak on behalf of any of the departments that they represent and talk about changes or policies or new legislation that you would like to see introduced. I mean, it's uh, a political process, so
Right.
it's
Right.
not just going in and talking about it. You have to put it in writing and have a bill to present. But there are other agencies out there that advocate for the same thing. They want to see
Right.
things better. They want to not have a report of a child dying after CPS has been involved. So, I mean, you have to align yourself with either a group like that or really yourself to go down and speak on behalf, be able to put it in writing and present it for legislation to make a decision on. So, I mean, it's a part of the political process for the state, and your voice can be heard. It's in Austin. You go and you can participate in those sessions and see about making a difference there.
Okay.
But as a parent, you should do all you can to find information about being a parent. I mean, there's not a guidebook. There's no one that's going to
Right. Right.
teach you
Right.
how to be a mom or a dad. But, it, but you should seek information. There are plenty of people out there who have done it. Talk to those you believe have done it well and get advice. When you have questions, ask. When you don't know, research. You just don't leave it up to just, oh, this is how it was for me. It must be good enough. Um, do better. Want better for your kid. Want them to be safe. Want them to be healthy. And want them to have a future. And things tend to work out better when you have hope yourself. It's
That's
it's
true.
it's darker when you don't have
So, CPS, there's room for improvement, but it's not like this conspiracy thing or whatever that's going on. Like, there's room for improvement, but it's not
Yeah,
anything
I don't
crazy.
believe the conspiracy thing. It's too many families. And if you had any idea of the number of calls that are received in intake in Austin about abuse and neglect, and then the number of investigations that go on that do not result in a death or harm to a child, you would look at it differently. Again, the ones
Okay.
that are highlighted on the news, those are the most unfortunate situations. But then there are other cases where children have been rescued and charges have been brought and people have been sentenced for the abuse and neglect that they've done to children. And again, those don't make the spotlight. So the
Right.
ones that are
Right.
highlighted on the news, they are real. They do happen, but it is not the majority. I can tell you when I tell you I had 77 cases, probably 50 of them were not an urgency, meaning that the allegations were determined to not to have any truth to them and that there wasn't any abuse and neglect going on. And then the other ones would have some concerns, but not necessarily an outright decision to remove the child, but more so to introduce the parent to some resources or some parenting or to teach them some skills to help them, ensure their child safety. But the volume of calls that are received are
Right.
are are, are enormous, and you should do some
Okay.
research to find out what those numbers look like
Okay.
before making a determination that CPS is ineffective because a child death shows up on the news, because there are thousands of cases on a daily basis.
Are you still affiliated with CPS? Do you still work with them in some sort of way, or no?
No, I do not work for CPS. But again, the decision is not the CPS worker. So we do
It's not.
rely on our experts. So if we have a concern that there's physical abuse, we do rely on the physician to make that determination. They have special clinics that do evaluations for abuse and neglect. And if they can't definitively say that these injuries are a result of physical abuse that has been caused or inflicted by the parent, I mean, again, because it's dealing with a court setting, so not only a family court, if there are going to be criminal charges brought, there it has to be substantial evidence, because you have to remember that a grand jury won't indict for charges if you have no evidence. We can't all go in with speculation and just concern. Concern means monitor the situation, keep an eye on the family, provide them with services, and do what you can, but you can only do that for so long, because the state won't allow you to just stay within someone's life for the duration of their child's growth. You have to do your investigation, make a determination, and then decide what the course of action is going to be. But more than likely, they're going to move on after a year. They may extend it to 18 months, but that's the most you're going to get. Okay. They can't hold your hand as a parent and just be with you for the rest of your life.
Okay, so as far as a former CPS person, do you ever feel like there was ever a time you made a wrong decision, or every decision you reported, everything was correct the whole time? Or do you think maybe there was something?
I was confident that the right decision was made. I felt that there were times where caution was being considered more than what the facts were. And so, but again, because the decision is not ultimately mine, if I was directed to take additional steps when I felt it wasn't warranted, I do it because that's the directive I'm given, and you just move forward. Okay. But most of the decisions are always made with the intent to ensure that the children are safe. So I was confident in my investigations. I felt like I thoroughly interviewed and met with my family and the children on the cases, including their teachers and neighbors, and just to try to make sure that all bases are covered. So I didn't have that uncertainty. So okay. I can see why a person would be stressed out if they're not able to gather enough information and they just don't know. Then you would spin your wheels wondering about the unknown. But if you're going out doing a quality investigation, you're asking questions, you're getting information from professional reporters such as teachers, doctors, you'll know more about the family and feel more confident in the decisions that you make.
I see potential subscribers.